me, I consider myself a native son of Winterville. Moved here mid-'80s with my family, my mother and father and sister, and my mom still lives here. And as I like to say, I doubled down. I married a Whitehead, and she grew up on Church Street as well. So we, in '05, we built a house. We were the last lot on Church Street, so we're right across. It's the gray brick house right across from the auditorium. And so, if you're ever there for music, leave the door open. I can sit on the porch. They kind of hear music, so. So I feel like we love it here, and we feel well rooted.
Yay!
So speaking of rooted, little segue there. So the tree we're going to talk about is the white oak tree on the corner closest to us, southeast corner, I think, of the police department. But first about Don Bauer. So if you remember the plaque, it was dedicated for Don from Patsy, from the Chandler family. So a little bit about Don, and I can't speak about Don without speaking about his wife, Julie Bauer. Don married up, put it that way. She's a great woman, and she actually provided most of the information. So I emailed her, asked a few questions, and told them I would speak on their behalf and give you background of that particular oak tree. So I got food on my paper somehow. So the first question I asked is for backstory. When did you and Julie move to Winterville, operate the bed and breakfast, and how long were you neighbors with the Chandlers? So the house they lived in was right next to George and Patsy. To the left, it's a house that they moved to. She said, we moved to Winterville in 1982, and then they moved out in 2000. The only reason they moved was that she was a principal at a school, and she just wanted to be closer. So they lived next door. So from 1982 to 2000, they lived in Winterville, next door to the Chandlers. And she said they operated the B&B, bed and breakfast, in the downstairs, 1/3 of the house, on the Sutter Street side for about 10 years. So I don't know exactly within that 18-year window, which 10 years. And in those years, we hosted hundreds of guests, including a number of international guests. And the guests always loved the quiet setting of Winterville. So that's their background. And so the next question I asked was, well, tell me about Sarah Fitzgerald's backstory and how she babysat and such. And so Miss Fitzgerald was the last, I think, piece of private property what is now the police department. So that was the last sort of piece. And I want to say she moved out in the 90s at some point. But she apparently moved to Winterville to be close to her family, Ronnie Harris, William Harris, and Emily Harris. And she decided that she'd enjoy providing child care to a small number of children. And one of those children was Eve, who was their youngest daughter. She said Eve was among Miss Sarah's little flock, and Sarah loved those children as if they were her own grandchildren. She kept that group of children until it was time to go to pre-K. So then I asked, well, what's the story specifically about that tree? And Miss Sarah didn't have a whole lot of shade at the time. She wanted a shade tree, and so when Eve, their daughter, was 3 years old, her and Don planted it for her. And she said it was really small when it was planted. And so it was planted, I think the plaque says, in 1984. So to me, it's a good reference of what a 38-year white oak would looks like in full light, no canopy competition. So I like to have a reference tree, so I have an idea. And then I asked her, well, can you relay any George Chandler or Chandler family stories or anything else you wanted me to add? And to quote the Bauer family, I get teary-eyed even writing about George. He was one of the finest people we've ever met. We love and still love the Chandlers like family. During the renovation of their house, George let me borrow his tractor, that's Julie speaking, to clear out some old brushes and stuff. She had never driven a tractor, so George called me, and his heart was as big as his name in that small town. So that's a little history, I guess, behind that one particular oak tree. That's more than you could ever put on a plaque. But and the Bauers wanted to be here, but they were out of town. and they still love Winterville. And so you can always pass that around if anyone wants to know some history behind that picture up there. So, any questions?
Thanks, Brian.